When Governor Ron DeSantis abruptly canceled his media appearances over the weekend, it led to a lot of speculation that he'd be ending his presidential campaign. And sure enough, on Sunday, that's exactly what happened. Facing the prospect of a distant third-place finish in the New Hampshire primary, DeSantis bowed out and endorsed Donald Trump. Now, on one hand, the disappointment from DeSantis' supporters, of which I was one and am one, is understandable. He's a fantastic governor who's more effective at advancing conservative policies than any other politician alive today. There's just no doubting that. The track record is clear. At the same time, there's also no question that it's a good thing that the primary effectively ended this weekend, as opposed to an even more protracted war of infighting among conservatives that leads always to the inevitable conclusion anyway, with millions more dollars wasted on pointless attack ads and everything else. We're not going to do that. Donald Trump will be the party's nominee. And that's going to be the case no matter how often Nikki Haley, who's still in the race, reminds us that she's a woman of color and that she's and also a person of color and a woman, and she was bullied for being brown on the mean streets of Orangeburg, South Carolina. But more on that later. This thing is over. And that means that the right can unite against its real enemies. And the real enemies are the powerful forces in our society who hate this country, who despise its people, and who seek to destroy our families and corrupt our children. And one of the clearest examples of this effort is the sheer scale and dishonesty of the left's fraudulent war against what they call book bans. As City Journal has noted, politicians at every level of government, from Governor Chris Sununu in New Hampshire to former Representative Liz Cheney in Wyoming, they all have claimed that schools are censoring classic reading materials, particularly in school libraries, at the behest of the Republican Party. Joe Biden has even appointed a book ban coordinator to pursue civil rights cases against libraries that offend the LGBTQ cult with their censorship, their alleged censorship. Biden also launched his re-election bid 8 months ago with a video falsely implying that Florida had banned the book To Kill a Mockingbird, which simply was not true. Of course it wasn't true, as even the Associated Press later had to admit. The truth is that this campaign against book bans is nothing more than a crusade to put pornography in schools. That's been clear for a while now. We've all seen the footage of parents repeatedly getting thrown out of school board meetings just for reading passages from the pornographic books in their children's school libraries. So these are books that are in the school libraries that you can't even read out loud at a school board meeting because they're too graphic. Dozens of those videos are out there at this point. And this is about exposing children to smut. And everyone can clearly see that. Anybody with a brain and who's honest can see that. What's changed is that now, with the election rapidly approaching, the forces pushing this degeneracy are emboldened. They're dropping the pretense that they're worried about discrimination or teaching history or whatever. They are, at this point, all but coming right out and saying that they want to expose children to pornographic materials. And they're doing it with the express support of the largest media conglomerates on the planet. Now, if you doubt that, I want you to watch this remarkable footage from MSNBC the other day. This is from Joy Reid's show. And speaking of remarkable, it remains one of the great marvels of the world that Joy Reid, despite being viscerally unpleasant to listen to or look at, and despite having nothing important to say and having never offered an even mildly interesting insight into any topic ever in her entire life, still has a show that, for yet another week, has not been canceled. Then again, this is MSNBC. I mean, they specialize in giving extraordinarily annoying and unappealing and stupid people TV shows. Al Sharpton still has a show on that network, after all, last I checked. Although I've never really checked, to be honest. Anyway, back to Joy Reid. So she was interviewing the co-founder of the group Moms for Liberty, which is, and the group is co-founded by a woman named Tiffany Justice. Now, before I show you the clip, here's the backstory. What's bothering MSNBC is that Moms for Liberty does not want a book called All Boys Aren't Blue, a memoir manifesto written by LGBTQ activist George Johnson, to be available for children to check out from school libraries. This is a book that includes descriptions of anal rape and incest, which are too graphic for me to read on the air. And this is the disadvantage that we find ourselves in when it comes to this issue, which is that you really need to hear specifically what's in these books to fully appreciate just how deranged these people are for wanting to put these books in schools. But the material is so objectionable and disgusting and embarrassing that I simply will not read it out loud. So, you can look it up for yourself and see. But suffice it to say that the book contains very, very detailed accounts of rape, sodomy, and other things that you really don't want your kids reading about. And there are hundreds of thousands of books in circulation that do not have any of that sort of content. Okay? So there's just no reason why this book, especially of all books, needs to be in a school library. As I've tried to explain in the past, almost every book that's ever been written will not be in any school library or in any school at all. Because there's so many books. So no matter what, you're choosing a very small, like thimble-sized portion of all the books that have ever been written to be in your school. All the other books are not going to be there. And so when you decide that, this book in particular needs to be in the school, when you got all these other books available, it really raises a lot of questions about your motives. I shouldn't really say they're not really questions. I mean, we know what your motives are. So this is a book that, according to local reports, is available in the young adult nonfiction section of 2 libraries in Huntsville, Alabama. These sections are for children between the ages of 12 and 18, which is roughly in line with the publisher's age recommendation for this book. And according to Moms for Liberty, there are records of a child as young as 9 checking out All Boys Aren't Blue from the library. What's incredible is that in this interview, Joy Reid does not dispute anything about the content of the book or how obscene it is. She doesn't concede that maybe 9-year-old children shouldn't be reading this. Instead, she goes out of her way to defend the book. Joy Reid begins by complaining that parents are going online and sharing passages from the book that she says are somehow taken out of context. And then she makes a very familiar argument from there. Watch.
The question I'm asking is, what is the expertise that you have and other Moms for Liberty advocates have to decide that a book, an award-winning book like All Boys Aren't Blue, isn't appropriate for students to read? What is your expertise?
What a tragic story of a young man who's anally raped by his adult family member. So you have incest, rape, pedophilia. Joy, you said you'd let me answer, so
sure.
I'm going to answer
Please
for
do.
you. In what context is a strap-on dildo acceptable for public school? That's my question to you. Tell me what the context around the strap-on dildo or the rape of a minor child by a teacher.
Hold on a second.
No, we're talking about public school.
One moment.
All right.
So now you've asked me questions.
Sure.
I'm going to answer it.
Okay.
Well, who is the main character? What's the name of the main character in All Boys Aren't Blue?
You're asking me right now.
You just gave me very specific information about this book, so you're presenting yourself as somebody expert.
It's the gentleman.
Hold on. Who's the main character in the book?
The main character is the author.
What's his name?
George, I believe, is his first name.
Because you're giving me very specific information that is.
You're asking me to remember the name of an author.
You
the
just
name of the
remembered
author
very
doesn't.
specific things.
Joy.
Here's my question.
We're talking about
Here's my question.
You didn't answer my question.
No. I'm going to answer your question.
Great. I would love to hear that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm interviewing you, and you're not interviewing me. So let's just make sure it's a conversation. Okay,
great.
So what I'm saying to you is that as you are not an expert in this book,
I don't have to be an expert to know that dildos aren't appropriate for public school. I mean, come on, let's get real.
Yeah, and she never really gets around to an answer, by the way. Because, of course, there's no way to answer that. Like, what's the context for anal rape or strap-on dildo, as was asked, that would make it acceptable for a child? What context makes that okay? You freak? You disgusting freak? Like, that we even have to ask you that question? It's like, I applaud Tiffany Justice for being able to contain her disgust to the level that she does. I find very impressive. I would not be able to do that, because you, Joy Reid, are just an awful, awful person, and it's just evil, like evil to your freaking core, that you want to expose this to kids. But all she has as well, she says, you're not an expert, unlike whoever gave this pornographic book an award. They're the experts, so therefore shut up. You don't get to have an opinion. That's what she's saying. Now, you may have noticed that it's become, of course, a common rhetorical tactic on the left, whether they're talking about climate change or transgenderism or book bans or pretty much anything. In the absence of any guiding moral principles, they're now fully reliant on the expert class, to the point that they can't think for themselves anymore about anything. And they don't want you to think for yourself either. It's just a reflex now. What do the experts say? Like, the experts about what? We're at the point where they don't want you to object to pornography in the children's section without first getting an expert's approval. I mean, just think about that for a moment. Joy Reid is claiming that you cannot object to children being exposed to books about anal rape unless you are an expert. Which raises the question, Joy, expert in what? Like, what the hell kind of expert do you need to be to understand the simple common sense fact that 12-year-olds don't need to be reading graphic sexual content? I mean, how long until they tell you you're not allowed to object to full-on child pornography or pedophilia unless you are an expert? Based on their logic, at this rate, it probably won't be long. In fact, that's basically where we are right now. Of course, in that clip, Joy takes this approach to a new level of absurdity, when she demands that Tiffany Justice name the author of the book, All Boys Aren't Blue. And I mean, it's the dumbest gotcha I've ever seen. And I guess because Justice couldn't provide the guy's full name quickly enough, we're supposed to conclude that she's not an expert in the book. You don't need to be an expert in this. And therefore, she's excluded from having an opinion on the topic. Because, you know, you can't object to children being exposed to sexual content unless you can give the full name of the person who created the sexual content. Makes total sense if you have brain damage. And speaking of brain damage, what follows from Joy Reid next, as you probably would have guessed, is the usual disingenuous parental rights argument. The idea is that parents should be able to expose their children to whatever they want, and reasonable people shouldn't be allowed to step in and prevent that. And these people don't give a damn about parental rights in any context, except when it's parents who want to expose their kids to sexual content or parents who want to mutilate and castrate their kids. So those are the only times that these demons care about parental rights. Let's watch.
Why is it your right or a Moms for Liberty activist's right to say that a parent who wants their child to have access to this book, which gives a personal experience of this author, why doesn't a liberal parent, for instance, or a parent of an LGBTQ kid, why don't they have a right for their child to just have access to this book? Why is it your right to say they can't?
So, again, we're talking about incest, rape, and pedophilia.
And each parent, each parent has to decide what is appropriate for their child to read. So I want you to answer. I'm going to ask it one more time.
Right.
What is your right to tell a parent who wants their child, who might feel seen by this story, why don't they have the right? Why don't they have the right as a parent to say, my child can have access to this book?
If a child feels seen by this story, that means that they have been the victim of a predator. That means that they have either been raped by a family member, they've experienced
and your proof of that is what?
You just said that
What's
if a child feels seen by this story.
So to recap, the conversation began with Joy suggesting that the context of the book makes it acceptable somehow, but she never explained what context would justify showing a child a graphic description of anal rape and incest. So now she circles back to her original point in a roundabout way. She implies that some children could benefit from reading the story because they'd feel seen and represented in the pages. And if parents want to encourage that, then we're supposed to go along with it. Now, she actually says all that. You heard it yourself. And again, just to be clear, this is not a book that encourages kids to take up sports or solve mysteries or learn about space flight or something. This book is exposing children as young as 9 years old to graphic scenes of anal rape. And according to the corporate press, children should read books like this and see themselves in the books. As Tiffany Justice pointed out, the implications of that are pretty dark, to say the least. This gets to the heart of what this whole debate is about, which is the left's attempt to legitimize deviant sexual contact with children. I mean, it's not hard to conclude that the reason they want to show children these books about graphic underage sex is that they see no problem with children engaging in this kind of behavior. And that could be why, throughout this whole interview, Joy never once condemns the content of the book. She doesn't say that some children probably shouldn't read it. I mean, she wouldn't even concede that. She wouldn't concede anything. Instead, she falls back on this idea that parental rights are absolute and we should never be able to dictate what other parents can and can't do. Even though, again, she doesn't give a damn about parental rights in any other context. But notice the incoherence of this argument. Because first, Joy says that no one can have an opinion about this book unless they're an expert and they've read it cover to cover and they can name the author's full name and give his date of birth and social security number. Then a few minutes later, Joy says that every parent should have the right to show their kids this book and their decision must be respected no matter what. So this is what's called a contradiction. And people who understand basic principles of logic can spot it right away. But people like Joy and the rest of the corporate press are too concerned with ideology to bother with principles or logic or anything else. And that's why, rather than present any kind of argument for why children need to read about anal sex, Joy concludes the interview by launching into bizarre personal attacks on Moms for Liberty. Watch.
Let me ask about the people who are making the decision for their parents, because you have not answered yet why a liberal parent or an African-American parent
We
can't
have
say
parents who are Democrats who are members of our organization.
But you're still trying to make decisions for all the kids. Here are some of the parents that are filing, or some of your advocates. Bridget Ziegler, the Moms for Liberty co-founder, the wife of the recently ousted Florida Republican Party chairman, Christian Ziegler, who allegedly was involved in threesomes, same-sex threesomes. Mrs. Ziegler was removed from the school board at which she was a leader. You've had
she wasn't removed from the school board.
Okay, you have Lauren DePaula. She was making book ban requests in Alachua County, but then records show that she and her husband didn't live there. They'd sold their home in that county. Carrie Blair in Tennessee, who was arrested for property theft charges after allegedly stealing from Target, skip scanning in Target. Why should those three people get to make decisions about what other children should be able to read? Other parents' children should be able to read.
Now, I have no idea if any of those allegations are true. And by the way, if you really want to play this game, Joy, do you want to go down the list of all the pedophiles and sexual abusers in the public school system? Okay, let's find all the teachers and administrators that support this kind of stuff. And you want to find a list of all the sexual abuse inflicted by those people? So, I don't know if any of that's true. From what Tiffany Justice says, they seem shaky, but honestly, it doesn't matter. This is a painfully transparent attempt to distract from the issue that this whole interview was about. I mean, even if all that's true, even if Moms for Liberty is full of the worst people on the planet, okay, and that's not even like what she just said that one of them didn't stole from Target and didn't scan. What the hell does that have to do with anything? But even if they're all serial killers and Nazis and supervillains, does that suddenly make it appropriate to supply children with reading material about anal rape? Like, is that what you're saying? So when a woman says, I don't think that kids should be reading books about anal rape, your response is, well, yeah, but you stole from Target. What does that have to do with anything? It makes no sense. But this is all Joy Reid can do. She doesn't want to talk about the books or why she wants children to read them. Instead, she just wants to attack the people who are pointing out what's in these books. I mean, it's hard to put into words the depths of the evil that is on display here. This isn't just one race hustler on MSNBC talking like this. It's pretty much all of the corporate press, along with the Biden administration, all the powerful institutions who are committed to pushing this smut in schools. It's going to take an equally forceful, concerted effort to stop them from succeeding. And this month, lawmakers in Florida introduced a bill that represents a really good start. The legislation would ban teachers and government employees from displaying the so-called Pride rainbow flag or associated lapel pins in public buildings and schools, for obvious reasons. The flag is a symbol of a radical religious cult that's specifically used to target children and indoctrinate them into an ideology that seeks at every turn to sexualize and corrupt them. And soon, if the bill passes, that symbol, which became omnipresent sometime in the past decade, will be gone. Now, it's simple and effective proposals like this that have made Florida under Ron DeSantis an attractive state for conservative families to live in. He's not campaigning for president anymore, but he's still going to be a leader in this fight, which could not be more urgent at this point. And what's needed now, especially as the primary effectively comes to a close, is for every conservative to unite and join in the fight against this evil. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.